How do you do? Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, my friends, depending where you are. I'm Emily Windsor Craig, and this is where I am at, at 1 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on July the 4th, 2020. I'm here in the northern part of the San Joaquin Valley in California, and it's hot as blazes again here today. History Reset is brought to you each Saturday to provide valuable information to the public that the corporate media and government refuse to divulge. This program is a public service, but please donate to People's Internet Radio to keep people's truth coming at you. Because as you know, what we're discovering is that there's more BS than there is real truth coming at us from all different quarters. Today I'm going to talk about liberty in the abstract, and I'm going to start with the idea of authority. Who has authority? And I didn't think about it too deeply until I got into this, and now I realize authority comes from longevity. Authority comes from not dying, not being mortal. And that's why law codes, because they're written on pages that don't disappear or die, they outlive the mortals who did the writing, all right? So if you're a mortal, if you're aging, you are already subject. Okay, and the people who are aging, who are claiming entitlement that they can demand XYZ, we're going to find out today that they're really fooling themselves. Okay, of course, every reality, every realization, every manifestation begins with an idea. And authority, the idea of authority, has many sources in philosophy and ideology. So today we're going to think about inherent authority, jurisdiction, liberty versus freedom. What is the difference between liberty and freedom? And anybody who is not aging and will not die has authority over anybody who is aging and will die, all right? And this is why despots, despots do what they can cruelly to simply eliminate, eradicate, or erase the people who do not accept their authority. I want to start with the idea of sovereignty. Sovereignty is held by those who live on. Okay, now that can be in the form of a dynastic bloodline name. The sons of, okay, the sons of the patriarch Abraham, Isaac, and Joseph, and Jacob, and they hold a tradition that holds their authority as it is written and kept. Okay, same thing goes with Sikh religion. They have a book, the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, which holds the traditions of the bloodlines of the authorities of their people. All right, and they have certain rules that they abide by according to the traditions of the bloodlines of the people, just as the West has certain authority according to our scriptures. But our scriptures have been fragmented. And so sovereignty and authority have become relative. Okay? Dominion is the relative authority that men attempt to establish over nature, particularly the nature of the ground that they're standing on. Okay, and that's the authority of natural laws of causes and effects versus the rule baiting of commercial statutes, okay? Our country has become the land of the fee and the home of the grave, okay, for many. Now, for those who have sovereignty, who have authority by longevity, by dynasty, by written code, they hold perennial advantages. Their authority is by control, direction, and power. They are dominant.
See, Emily?
Yeah.
This is where you and I disagree on this subject.
Okay.
I don't believe anyone has authority or sovereignty over anyone else.
You're saying one human over another human.
Right.
Okay. I'm talking about the difference between the immortal being who does not die versus the human.
Well, that would have to be, that would have to be proven.
Okay. Okay. But that's what I'm talking about, is the authority of the eternal that doesn't die, that doesn't go away, versus the liberty or self-sufficiency or liberty of the human that does pass on and perhaps have an opportunity to come back and do it again. That's another matter. Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right. But the innate authority of the eternal, okay, even though you've never met one and maybe I've never met one, is in theory why religions hold sway. And so whereas you're not a follower aficionado of, quote, religion, because you don't suck up to some eternal being so he'll help you become eternal too.
Well, I do though. But I just, there's just things that I have problems with.
Okay, all right, cool. That's good. That's good. You help the discussion, you enliven it. Okay. The eternal beings have inherent lordship or mastery. They've mastered it all, maybe. Okay. The eternal beings have supremacy. They're first and foremost. They have overlordship. They have prepotency. Okay. They have the upper hand and the edge. All right. And they influence the territory of a sovereign or a government. Okay. They influence the culture of the clan or the dynasty or the bloodline of the book. Okay. So their territory is called their colony. They control it by the leadership of their dynasty, in which all of their subjects are dependent. They may be in the form of an empire or a fiefdom. Okay. They grasp their sovereignty very, very, very strongly, and they fight over it. They believe they have a certain area of jurisdiction, if not over the territory itself, but then over the minds of the members of the bloodline or the dynasty or the book that they hold as subject. They may have outposts, they have possessions, they have protectorates and provinces and satellites and territories and tributaries. Okay, those are the jurisdictions of those who are eternal, either because they never die themselves or because their dynasty carries on for them. All right, so then there's the matter of what are their subjects like? I have 3 pets, and my pets have taught me about this. I have a dog and 2 cats, and my dog owns me, all right? She absolutely owns me the way God owns me. If I don't feed her what she happens to like, she'll go poop somewhere. If I don't feed her what agrees with her, will be cleaning it up all over the place. Okay, okay, she has to be walked X times a day. She's a high maintenance Shih Tzu. She requires trimming and baths, and when she's trimmed, she has to wear little garments. Okay,
She has you trained, huh?
She's got me trained. Okay, there's no question who's the boss in this house, and it's not me. All right. I don't think she'll outlive me, but as long as she's alive, she's got me around her little finger. And then I have a cat that I own, and that cat is absolutely subject to me. He adores me. When I'm walking around outside, he follows me everywhere. He will come when I call him. But when he's in the house, I absolutely have to dictate his behavior, because he and my other cat, who's neutered, do not like each other. So when he's in the house, he can only be here, he can't be there, and he has to do this instead of that, and he gets this food instead of that food. And so he's totally under my control. And he doesn't mind. It's okay. It's okay with him. He appreciates the wet food. He appreciates the nice warm bed when he's here. Okay. And then I have another cat, Boris. And Boris is kind of half and half. Boris does what he likes most of the time, but when Muffin's here, Boris can't do this and he has to do that. So there's a half and half situation. And Liberty is that half and half situation where we have absolute boundaries and limits on what is possible to us, but we have a certain amount, an area of freedom where we can function. All right. A state of being free within society. We're free from oppressive restrictions, we hope, imposed by authority on one's way of life and behavior and thinking. And these latest events having to do with the COVID-19 epidemic, if you want to call it that, or bioweapon, if you want to call it that, have brought all this to mind, how in the recent few days, weeks, and months, we have experienced a sequence of absolute madness, contradictions, contradictory indicators and contradictory facts. And are you supposed to fish or cut bait or wear a mask or not wear a mask or be 6 feet apart? And can you sing in church or can you go to the store? I mean, it's crazy, all right? And so that's why I thought today is a good time to think about liberty and what liberties we may actually have under the present circumstances, which are kind of crazy. Now, as background, we already know that there is a layer of leadership over the governments of the world that is staging a set of events. Albert Pike, the Grand Commander of the Masons back in 1871, wrote a letter to Dr. Massini in which he looked forward and said, we're going to stage 3 world wars, and World War I will get rid of the monarchies, and World War II will be this party against that party, and World War III will be when Christianity and Islam take each other out, right? And so we already know that there's a layer of human influence by somewhere, all right, that is staging the bioterrorism and staging the Marxist Bolshevik incursions into civil society and staging serial wars and staging protection rackets. All right, protection rackets, there are a lot of these. And protection rackets is one of the things that I've been talking about lately because so many of them are allowed in our society to exist and occur. We have bribery is now called lobbying, okay, all right, and cruelty exists by collusion and conspiracy, all right, and misery and penury go together because there's not a sense of fair play in corporate statutes. In fact, corporate statutes since 1871 and 1933 has reduced human beings to the level of chattel. We are consumable products, and our names are in all capitals. And the only way to get out from under the label of being a consumable product is to go to a common law court and go through some procedures to get oneself declared to be a living human being. I mean, there are people doing this, all right? Protection rackets are the double dealing that we see, and the usury fees, okay, and the lobbying and the perfidy involved in secret and classified operations, all right, and the piracy involved in legislators that take money from one account and rob Peter to pay Paul. I mean, we're seeing protection rackets out the wazoo now, and they have really descended our governing functions into the level of a mafia, which is just really sad, all right? So although we have been relatively free within society from oppressive restrictions, that has come to a complete halt, and now we are no longer free from oppressive restrictions, and we have to decide what we're going to do about that. And that's going to be toward the end of this presentation, and it's a lot more serious matter than most people really think about it, okay? In the Navy, shore leave is granted to a sailor, but that doesn't cut his dependency from the Navy, right? And so those of us who are subject to the temporary authorities of cities, regions, states, and so on, we have dependency with a measure of license. We have subjugation with a measure of volition and free choice and self-determination. But we've gotten to the point where people are chafing. We're saying, you know, something is out of hand here, all right? Now, individuals should enjoy the liberty to pursue their own interests and preferences. Now, that is a position statement. But if you have read Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030, you find that the United Nations has legislated over the heads of all the governments to declare how land is to be used. And if you are a person who believes they already own property here or there or somewhere, Agenda 2030 is here to tell you that they're going to take your property away from you, away from your children, away from your grandchildren, and no, you're going to have to live in a stack 'em and pack 'em high rise along a certain civil corridor. You notice on YouTube how many videos are being put up by people who are either building tiny houses or living in RVs, okay, which of course would satisfy the Agenda 2030 mandate that people only use a tiny amount of space. Now, I happen to be a person that doesn't need a lot of space, but families really do, okay? People don't do well when they're imprisoned, okay? And being at liberty can be a prison for the mind for those people who feel that they are being accused of something or being sought after for a reason, whether it is correct and true or not. And what we're seeing in this atmosphere of restrictions is people are locked down in fear. I believe, according to the articles I've seen, 6 million guns have been purchased by first-time buyers in the last 3 months, okay? People are scared. They're really scared because all these restrictions don't make a lot of sense, okay? And people are afraid to take liberties. They're afraid to go outside without wearing a mask. There's a gal here. Now, I live in a square apartment complex around a pool. And there's one tenant here who is so terrified of what might happen that she wears a mask outside around the pool. That is terror, all right? Terror to do something without first asking permission. That's a terrorized person indeed. So statute liberty, how do we stretch our wings and exert liberty when we know that our sovereignty is limited by our lifetime, by our access to resources, and by our influence among the elites, the dominance hierarchy, as Jordan Peterson puts it, okay? We're always having to deal with authority and with authorization, okay? You have to have a license for your car. Now, some people get authority from their birthright. Others utilize the function of choice to assert their authority. Women who opt to abort a newborn, okay, are using their choice to assert authority, and that authority has consequences. There are clearances. People,
Emily?
Yeah.
Don't you think they're just shirking the responsibility?
It's actually a lot more complex than that, because they're cutting their own bloodline. And that's a matter of metaphysical connections. They're cutting their themselves away from their bloodline, so that after they've passed on and when they come back, they don't have anybody to come back to. Okay, they're preventing themselves from having another incarnation experience. That's how serious it is. It isn't just shirking responsibility. They're cutting off their nose to spite their face. It's really bad. Okay, we get clearances from authority to do.
So what's going to happen to that? What's going to happen to that soul?
It will just eventually dwindle and go blink and be gone. You see, that's a very self-defeating decision choice to make. And you've heard of the Akashic records and
Yes.
The angelics. Okay, now, one of the things I wanted to point out to our audience, and if you haven't seen this book, it's basic education in history. The entire universe is a hierarchy. And the planetary sovereign that we have, Yahweh, that is a position, okay? He's kind of the physical manager of the planetary systems. And there's hierarchy above him and below him. There's hierarchy everywhere. All right, so that our behavior is monitored and assessed and judged all the way along our lives. And when we choose something, we're signing up for a course. Okay. Choices are not just unilateral. When you make a choice, when you learn, I had the most interesting experience. About a week ago, I decided to cut something out of my diet completely that I had been cheating on. And so there was a new dialogue in my mind, and there were some new responsibilities that came with the new dialogue, with the new opportunity. And I finally squared with that, and I thought to myself, you mean my making a decision about how to affect my health has something to do with the options and opportunities that are coming at me? And I got an affirmation. All right. If you're paying attention to spirit, if you're listening for the still small voice of God, and you know that prayer is telepathy, it's just telepathy, all right, and you're in constant communion with whoever your spirit guidance has brought to you or that you've attracted, all right, this is a relationship that affects your human relationships and your government. It affects everything. And we live at a very interesting time when so many people are living solitary, absolutely solitary. So they have no one else to consider physically in their environment, but they have to live with themselves. They have to live with themselves as their own roommate. I am my own roommate. And how do I take care of myself and my house and my room for my own roommate? You see, the isolation of the masses in little cubicles is serving to give the spiritual hierarchy a chance to get to know us. Isn't that interesting? All right. And we get clearance to do one thing that'll affect something else. We get constraints to, shall we say, discourage us from doing something. We get elbow room. We get entitlements, okay? And notice how today's generation of young people feel because they participated in a contest and they got a participation award, that they are entitled to all kinds of goodies no matter whether they can do anything or not. Okay. We get exemptions if we plead for them. We get latitude. We can move back and forth. We get leeway. We get license. We get a driver's license. You get a hunting license, a fishing license, a marriage license. What are some of the licenses you get? A license to practice a profession. But the license to practice a profession, you have to buy into the dogma. You have to buy into the dogma and the doctrine and the policy and the procedure and the practice of the hierarchy and the hegemony that runs that profession. How many physicians have walked away from the practice of medicine because the allopathic school has become so totalitarian? Who knows? Okay. There's a margin of uncertainty around us that's not very large. Okay. We see opportunities and options only occasionally. The opportunity to take a turn is a big deal at any age. The opportunity to actually take a turn at a new job, take a turn at being married, take a turn at learning a new skill is always a challenge. And it's not just a matter of just showing up. Just showing up is easy, but doing the deed, doing the whole turn is what's more difficult. And for those people who are in the military or understand the military, a lot more recruits are recruited than are able to get through boot camp. Boot camp is tough. There are challenges in boot camp that a lot of people can't meet. And because we live in a universe hierarchy where every choice and performance is assessed, We are, in a sense, in a material, mortal boot camp to see where we fit in the larger universe, which you will certainly find out about if you read the Urantia book. Okay, so we're always seeking permission. We always have limited prerogatives, much more limited privileges, and we are likely to be sanctioned. Okay, our civil liberties, civil rights, and human rights are set out in written documents that we must not overstep. And if we overstep them, then we are known to be dissidents, seditionists, Bolsheviks, communists. We are the ones, insurrectionists, who are not accepting the status quo. And frankly, with rules of law, which are based on the laws of cause and effect, versus corporate statutes, administrative codes, and the universal commercial codes, have so confounded law, and of course the legal and law profession profit off the fact that these three types of laws and rules are all confounded. That makes just about everybody a dissident, doesn't it? Because we all realize that rule baiting is not the same as a holy law from God based on the laws of cause and effect. If you do a good deed, you should get a good outcome. Ta-da. If you refrain from doing something harmful, you should get a good outcome. And if you make an error, there should be a process to put you back on the path to doing good. Okay, so now we can start thinking about how the Bill of Rights was intended to secure basic civil liberties. But what has that got to do with freedom? Freedom is the power or scope to act as one pleases, right? And as Lucifer put it, do as thou wilt. Now, what are the implications of do as thou wilt? Do as thou wilt means you can do harm and nothing happens to you. Okay. You can refrain from doing good and nothing happens to you. You can be on a renegade or piracy or protection racket or mafia course and nothing happens to you. If you know archaeology, paleontology, and so forth, you realize that we live on a world where are literally dozens of ruined and destroyed cities. Sodom and Gomorrah, okay. There was the flood of Noah's Day. There's the mud flood story. There's this reset and that reset. What was that civilization that got wiped out by the volcano? And 15 cities are 30 meters, 100 feet underwater next to cities that have been rebuilt. Okay, so what we know is this world is full of civilizations that didn't make it because they had become so cynical that the eternal ones decided they couldn't be allowed to continue. I don't know if you've been looking at the news coming from China this week. You know, China is a totalitarian country that has been marketing body parts out of living people for some years now, that has been destroying and martyring the people who are innocent of any crime. They just simply have a spiritual orientation instead of a materialistic orientation. China has been communist in the most extreme sense of totalitarianism for half a century now. Well, as we speak, China is being hammered by hail, floods, earthquakes, They have a dam about to burst and flood 500 million people. Okay. China is seeing the wrath of some eternal being who's decided that China has an authority that's out of line with basic civil liberties and human rights. So I think if you look at China today, you realize that there is a cosmic authority. And we are all, because we're all mortal, we are all subject to that cosmic authority, whether we want to be or not. And the fact is that our human authorities have, on one hand, been speaking to the ideals of justice and fairness and equity and liberty and sovereignty and yaketa, yaketa, smacketa on one hand. But on the other hand, secretly, behind closed doors and behind curtains, since 1947 Roswell and the 1954 Greada Treaty that Eisenhower signed with ETs, which allows slavery and superior races culling inferior races and the whole protection racketeering domain. The United States is in a very precarious situation right now. We have a president who wants to return to rule of law, return to the actual concept of justice in which doing a good thing gets you a good outcome. But we have a seditionist faction schooled for half a century in quackademia by professors teaching the Frankfurt School and Saul Alinsky and Marxism and the Maoist form of communism, which utilizes the most extreme and destructive methods to destroy the civil laws and civil societies. We have a problem in this country is we're on the razor edge of not being worthy to continue. And a lot of people don't realize that the election rigging has been going on since the Pegasus DARPA project by NSA and the NRO back since the 70s. The Looking Glass project provided the forward-looking futuristic predictions that led Pegasus to influence all of the elections up until 2016 when their system broke and white hats somehow, I don't know how it happened in 2016, but we have a real patriot president trying to turn this thing around all by himself. And he's standing by himself. Amazing. This is historic. This is historic. Okay, so let's think about who has freedom. The one has freedom who's not afraid of dying, who doesn't have to fear death anytime soon. All right? Now, I don't know any of us who isn't worried about COVID-19's infection rate, but its infection rate, yeah?
I'm not.
You're not, okay. Well, you might not be worried by the infection rate, but there are certain things that exacerbate and bring on the worst of the COVID-19 virus. I spent 2 weeks listening to George Webb describe in minute detail the intricacy of immune reactions of the human body and how that COVID-19 bioweapon has been constructed. And it has been constructed with packets in it containing HIV, SARS, and Ebola, okay, that are dormant, okay? But what activates the COVID-19 is glyphosate in food, because what glyphosate does is dehydrate the grains so that they're easier to harvest, but they also dehydrate the body cells. Okay, anything over 3G dehydrates the body cells in the human biology. In fact, it dehydrates the body cells in any living organism. Okay, so glyphosate 3G and upward in internet services, and any virus at all, even if it's a common cold, will activate the COVID-19 and break it open so that the SARS and HIV and Ebola become potentially active. This COVID-19 looks harmless right now, but when 5G activates in October, we are going to see what happened in Wuhan. The first week of the activation of 5G in Wuhan will be people dropping over dead, because that is what the COVID-19 virus, without any internal protections, has in store for us. So we're going to
Emily,
yeah.
There's some big cities that already have 5G.
Yes. Okay. But they're not, and it's mostly on the East Coast right now. All right. I understand that.
Chicago has it.
Yes, and we have 5G here, but you are still able to turn off the Wi-Fi so that the radiation right around your router drops to 0. And I had to do that. Otherwise, I had serious radiation coming off my router. And I've been sitting in it for 2 years. Yes, I know that. There are still ways to get out from under it. But starting in October, when the rollout is complete, it will be harder and harder to get out from under. And it will be activating those packets in those people who are still holding on to the COVID-19 virus in their systems. And so it's going to detonate in some people, and it's going to get worse. And so there's reason to be cautious, but not to be totally paranoid. All right. And we have to think about the freedom to be free from fear. We want to be free from fear. So what do we do in order to minimize our risk of having COVID-19, first of all, resident in our system? Secondly, having it activated by glyphosate, further infection, or 3G, 4G, and 5G or 6G in the internet, the electronics around us. Okay, so what do we think about doing? We think about moving to an area where it's not going to be as prevalent. We think about consuming only foods that have never been touched by glyphosate. We think about keeping ourselves and our environments clean enough that we're not likely to be spreading disease around us. I've become a lot more fastidious in my housekeeping. It's one thing that I've done. My hygiene has improved, and I had an attack back about 13 years ago of Morgellons, and the Morgellons that attacked me comes out in my skin. I still get lesions from Morgellons, mostly under control, but as you can see, not always under control. Okay, so the Morgellons has an effect on our immunity system also, all right? So we do what we can. We do what we can to minimize our risks of catching from other people, right? So one thing we can do is learn to get along without other people as much as we used to. Self-isolate is an opportunity to become spiritually attuned. It's not just a matter of staying disease-free, but it's also a matter of inner development and inner resources. During this time, this is all temporary. Everything is temporary. And so during this time of infection and fear, this is just a good time to stick around, stay home, and consider that a free choice to remain free and clear of the problem of mortality. We choose to be free and clear of the problem of mortality by many different strategies. One is hygiene and cleanliness. Another one is detox. There are methods for detoxing the human body, including foot patches and detox baths and detox tea that people take, okay? There's fasting for detox. There's intermittent fasting is the latest craze. And adopting a diet that minimizes the use and consumption of food products that have been subject to glyphosate from Monsanto. Now, what would those foods be? They would be the grains and the oils. Okay, so you stay away from grains. The diet that might help prevent infection would be what you call the paleo diet, okay? Paleo diet, which minimizes the grains and oils that get treated with glyphosate. Okay, what else can you do? You stay healthy, you get sunshine, you exercise, you keep your mind active, you keep busy and purposeful. These are all steps we take to keep our tenure, Have you noticed how some of these elites keep their tenure by consuming adrenochrome or slathering on face cream that has the parts of dead babies? I just can't imagine using that stuff. Okay. All right. There are ethical ways to protect our longevity and our tenure. And then there are the ways of the extremists and the technologists and the scientists. And I just tend to leave them alone. Okay. I'm not going there. But you see, it takes a spirit of a sound mind who wants to achieve longevity. I want to outlive these crazy people who are doing all these crazy things. That's what it comes down to. Wouldn't you agree with that, Steve? We want to outlive those crazies.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. And that may be the best we can do. And some people want to outlive the crazies by going out and buying guns now. Well, that's their bag, I've never shot a gun in my life. I wouldn't know how to do it. All right, so if you're absolutely free, you're an eternal being and you're not aging. Do you know anybody like that? I don't either, okay? So authority by command and autonomy and blessing and dispensation and carte blanche, free reign, free will, hegemony, independence, self-determination, sovereignty, superiority, non-compulsion. These are all wishes when they're expressed by people who are mortal. This is our wish. We want to stick around long enough to see matters get resolved, long enough to see the conflicts, not just take out this side or take out, getting rid of something is not the way to solve a problem. What King Nanar said was, destruction is never a blessing. Life itself is not the problem. And so we want to promote and preserve life. And this is what you find yourself doing as you get further on in your decades, you want to promote and preserve life. And also, you want to have a little influence on the younger people who have been so confused and disturbed by the propaganda and the rule baiting and the divide and conquer strategies of the political back and forth that we see now. Being able to sort it out like fishing tackle, slicing and dicing it thin so you can explain it to your children and grandchildren. Yes, the only people who have absolute authority are people who don't die, or whose bloodline and bloodline culture is able to perpetuate itself from generation to generation. This is why homosexuality doesn't work in Christianity. Maybe it works somewhere, I don't know. But the whole Christian idea is that the parents teach the children to carry on not only with the belief system and the ethics, but with the maternal and paternal gifts in genes, the genetic DNA that welcomes the Christian message. Okay, we want to carry on. That's what we're working on. That's what I'm working on. And so teach your children that there are authorities that are absolute, who can simply wipe everything off the planet, as we see happening to China right now. There are other authorities who are less drastic and dramatic, but authorities have their ways to influence our behavior, and we have to be careful about how they influence us, because there was a saying in ancient Roman Empire: if a man will allow himself to be deceived, let him be deceived. Well, the New World Order buys in to that thought and that way of thinking. If people are willing to allow themselves to be deceived by the difference between laws of the land versus maritime admiralty, corporate statutes, well, then they deserve to be victimized by the consequences of having been deceived. If people don't know how to protect themselves from a virus by basically self-isolating themselves, staying away from people, and being very clean and hygienic and very careful, then they're going to obtain the disease and the consequences. If they don't know the effects of 3G, 4G, 5G, 6G on the organism, on the electronic cells of the organism, then they're going to attract the problems that occur with the propagation and the rollout of the higher levels of radiation in our environment. Okay, that's going to be a problem unless you protect yourself from it, all right? And if you have, this neighborhood used to be a neighborhood of drug dealers, but at some point, the cops and the churches and the community got together and threw all the drug dealers out of the neighborhood. And now this is a nice place, okay? 50-year-old apartments, but we don't have any problem with drugs and crime here anymore. Why? Because the people who lived here said enough is enough. And Mr. Trump, the president, is saying enough protection rackets, enough bribery, enough serial wars, enough corruption, enough of the human trafficking, enough of the gun running and the drug running. We have to return to being a law-abiding country, doing things the right way. And I stand with the idea that, yes, law has to have a renaissance, and the attorneys have to be made accountable for the miseries that they're causing by promoting the confusion between the legal systems, by accepting their role as a protector of the Queen of England through the Bar Association and not becoming advocates for their own clients to clarify the rule of law, to clarify and not modify our obligations in this governing system. And you know what? Steve, I've done it.
You're all done?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. We have to do something about all this corruption. We can't just sit here and let it happen. We the people have to say no.
I know, but we still have the age-old problem, like Napoleon said, religion keeps people from murdering the elite. It is still immoral and illegal to kill someone.
Yeah, it's immoral and illegal to kill someone, except under Islam, when all you have to do is chop off people's heads, and that's what they do. And so it's a slippery slope that we're talking about. Now, I'm not certain about the progress of the number of indicted people that are down at Guantanamo. Have you heard anything about that?
No.
Okay, because it is alleged that those indictments are proceeding and that the executions are proceeding. So this is a light at the end of the tunnel. How are we going to get rid of the pedophiles and the child sex traffickers and the gun runners and the drug runners? And there is that hope that those indictments, and there are over 100,000 indictments of people who are involved.
Yep.
We can hope that that is a serious movement, just as we can hope that Gesera and Nesera, the reorientation of the monetary system, can be activated in a rational, meaningful, logical way. But I don't know how that's going to happen either. Right now we're looking down a long hole at a black hole right now. So we keep working at it. And I hope now folks understand the difference between not being subject to anyone versus being subject to some. Being subject to anything has a lot to do with who owns you. So we need to spend our time deciding and defining who owns us. And for my part, the Trinity, God and Jesus Christ own me. Those are the behaviors that I have adopted in order to see where they go. Because we can't demand, we're not here to demand anything, right? That's not going to work.
I'm not here. No.
No? All right. All right. Is the other Steve going to take over?
I think eventually. I'm not sure. I don't know if he's online yet, but.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, I'm done for the day. And I love your little objections. They really spark me. So keep that up for me, okay? I like that. That's good.
You know, the only problem I have is it's called anarchy. No rulers, no masters. No rulers, no masters, no slaves.
Yeah, but that works for you because you're self-educated and self-disciplined.
Well, being good is a choice.
Yes.
Being bad is also a choice. I don't care what anybody says. There are, I don't believe inherently people are evil. I think they make the choice to do these things. Yeah. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
I'm not a scientist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a sociologist or whatever kind of a doctor. But